Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and General, I am confounded. In fact, I continue to be confounded. And what I find so confounding is the administration's mantra hasn't changed. From Jay Carney to Hillary Clinton to the President himself to Ben Rhodes to even yesterday, Bernadette Meehan, the National Security Council. And maybe, Mr. Chairman, instead of teaching reading comprehension, maybe we ought to teach writing comprehension, because I don't understand what this statement means except the end of it. The content reflects what the administration was saying at the time, whatever that means, and what we understood to be the facts at the time. So that's the mantra, Mr. Chairman, in general, is that we use the best evidence we had at the time, the facts that we had at the time. So you can imagine, General, that would make someone who's interested in facts and evidence to say, okay, well then cite all the facts for me. Cite the evidence. If your mantra really is that we use the best facts and the best evidence we had at the time, then cite the facts for me. Call your first witness. Introduce your first piece of evidence. Because I'll tell you the first piece of evidence I would introduce is from the State Department. Beth Jones to Cheryl Mills. Mr. Chairman, you know who Cheryl Mills is. Jake Sullivan. This is September the 12th. Mr. Chairman, this is well before the administration started misleading the American people. We've got an email from Beth Jones to Cheryl Mills and Jake Sullivan and a plethora of other people. I told him, with him being the Libyan ambassador, the group that conducted the attacks, Ansar al-Sharia, is affiliated with Islamic extremists. So that's the State Department that knew the day after that this video had nothing to do with the attack in Benghazi. So that's the State Department. CIA, station chief in Tripoli, Mr. Chairman, not, and for those who don't know what that word means, he repeated it again, not an escalation of protest. This is someone in Libya at the time. CIA says video had nothing to do with it. Now we go to DOD, military. What evidence did you have that this was an escalation of a protest rooted in spontaneity that got out of control and resulted in the murder of our 4 fellow Americans? Did the military have any evidence supporting the video narrative?
No, sir, there was none.
Well, that's what's so confounding, Mr. Chairman, is the State Department knew it wasn't a video. The CIA knew it wasn't a video, and for those that are a little bit slow, they repeated the word not twice. The military knew it had nothing to do with a video. But that brings us to the White House. And I know, Mr. Chairman, initially we were told that the White House had nothing to do with the drafting points, that Mike Morrell is the one who sanitized those and changed the word terrorist to extremist and changed it from attack to demonstration and did whatever he could to cast the administration in the most favorable light. We thought that it was just Mr. Morrell doing that until we got an email from Ben Rhodes, Mr. Chairman. Goal number 1, to convey that the United States is doing everything we can to protect our people and facilities. I'm glad that this is dated September 14, 2012, Mr. Chairman, because it sure as hell was not their goal before September 11th. We've had hearing after hearing about the failure to provide security at our facility in Benghazi. So I'm glad that that was their goal after 4 of our fellow Americans were murdered, but it sure as hell was not their goal beforehand, or they would not have refused to provide security to that facility. Goal number 2, to underscore that these protests are rooted in an internet video and not a broader failure of policy. And therein we have our answer. The goal was to do everything we can to deflect attention away from this feckless foreign policy we have in the Middle East that isn't working. Remember the mantra, Mr. Chairman? Al-Qaeda's on the run. GM's alive. Osama bin Laden's dead. Al-Qaeda's on the run. When really they're standing at the front door of our facility in Benghazi, getting ready to murder our ambassador and burn it down. And then yesterday, Mr. Chairman, you may remember the White House, I'm going to edit out all the stumbling and stammering that Jay Carney did. I'm just going to give you the nuts and bolts of what he said, is that this memo I just made reference to has nothing to do with Benghazi. Well, I find that interesting because of the third point, and I know I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman, but the third goal was to show that we are resolute in bringing people who harm Americans to justice. If that's not talking about Benghazi, where else did we have people harmed other than Benghazi, Mr. Chairman?
I thought there was an immunity agreement in place between the Department of Justice and this witness. So if he's been immunized and you can't prosecute anyone for anything, where is the criminal liability to him coming and answering questions? Which further assumes that every question you ask is going to expose him to criminal liability. There is no Fifth Amendment privilege against answering non-incriminating questions.
Let me also inject here.
No, I have great respect for Mr. Lynch. I have asked what kind of a...
His attorney, Mr. Pagliano's attorney, says in his letter that he was given limited immunity for that purpose.
Well, that raises another interesting question that I hope the gentleman from Massachusetts will help me figure out, which is when you've reached an agreement with the government, oftentimes it includes cooperation with other entities within that same government. So I wonder whether the Department of Justice in their proffer or immunity agreement with Mr. Pagliano made it clear that he needed to cooperate with another branch of government. We can't prosecute anyone. Only the Department of Justice can, and they've made it, frankly, crystal clear they're not prosecuting anyone in this fact pattern. So where's the criminal liability?
The gentleman has constitutional rights under the Fifth Amendment. Whether they are violated by the FBI or violated here in Congress,
well,
still violated.
But as the gentleman from Massachusetts knows, the Fifth
witness,
Amendment...
he cannot be required to be a witness against himself.
Right, but the Fifth Amendment doesn't protect you from non-incriminating answers.
Well, we've got a criminal referral here.
Not on him. He can say his name.
Sure it is.
He can say where he worked.
Sure
Every answer
it
doesn't
was issued after
incriminate
The
you.
gentleman from Massachusetts will suspend. The gentleman from South Carolina.
Could I engage with the chair in a colloquy?
Yes.
I thought witness Pagliano was granted immunity.
That's what I've read.
Well, Congress can't prosecute anyone, so the one entity who can has granted him immunity. I'm trying to figure out what his criminal liability is.
If the gentleman would yield.
Well, I was having a colloquy with the chairman.
I understand
but
that,
if you can answer the question, I'll be happy to hear from you.
The FBI granted him limited immunity for the purpose
The FBI didn't grant him immunity. The Department of Justice granted him
That's
immunity.
correct. That's correct. For that limited purpose.
How do you know it was limited use immunity? I haven't seen the immunity agreement.
Will the gentleman yield?
Sure.
But he can incriminate himself because we've issued a criminal referral here.
He's got immunity.
Because he doesn't have immunity. He doesn't have immunity.
You haven't seen the immunity agreement.
Look at it. If you want to read it yourself, it's from the gentleman's attorney. He's got limited
No,
immunity.
I'm going to need a more reliable source than a criminal defense attorney. I want to read the agreement itself. I want to read the agreement between the Department of Justice and this witness, and whether or not that agreement requires this witness to cooperate with other entities of government. That is commonplace. For them to say you can tell us the truth, but you can't tell Congress, makes no sense. That's all I want.
Okay, the gentleman will suspend. The committee should also be aware that the committee did send a subpoena to Mr. Pagliano to produce this immunity agreement. That was due today at 10 a.m., and he did not produce that as well. So he was under subpoena to not only have his presence here, but so that everybody on this panel can see this immunity agreement, which he supposedly has in his possession. Those documents were also subpoenaed by the committee, and he did not comply with that as well.
What we have done as a committee, and through you, on this referral, is put him under threat of criminal prosecution because of the issue that you're investigating. I understand that. But it puts him in jeopardy coming before this committee while that criminal referral is in existence. And I'm just saying, he's an American citizen. I know the Constitution gets in the way of this committee sometimes. Did the chairman issue a criminal referral on Mr. Pagliano?
When we heard that the FBI had not looked at anything that Secretary Clinton had testified under oath before Congress, we did give a referral. We issued it, but we don't know.
Here's my point. Here's my point. You issued a criminal referral for an individual, and then you asked him to come in here and testify before Congress. Let me
clarify.
That would require him to surrender his Fifth Amendment rights if you're referring him and putting him under threat of criminal prosecution and then asking him to come in here. That's not fair. And the immunity doesn't cover him because your referral for criminal prosecution came after the fact and beyond the limited purpose for which he was granted immunity, sir.
For them to say you can tell us the truth, but you can't tell Congress makes no sense.